Welcome, everybody. I'm Bill Cavanaugh. I'm the director of the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology here at DePaul. Thanks for coming out on a cold night. Please help yourself to the food that we have. And we're delighted tonight to welcome Virginia Azcuy, who is one of the most prominent theologians in all of Latin America these days. I think we can say that safely. Like God, she is everywhere, at least everywhere in Latin America. She teaches at the Pontifical University, Pontifical Catholic University of Argentina in Buenos Aires. But she bilocates, as many of the saints do, and teaches at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile in Santiago as well. And she's also taught at the University of San Salvador, the University of Salvador, which is in Argentina. Is that right? Argentina, that's right. And she's author of too many books and publications to mention, but I do want to say a little bit about some of the other interdisciplinary work that she's done. She's the coordinator of Theology, which is a consortium of Latin American women theologians, and so she does a lot of kind of cross-disciplinary and cross-border kind of work. But she's here to talk tonight about a trend at which she's really in the forefront in Latin America. It's a trend of doing field work in theology that has begun to kind of get a lot more attention over the last 10 or 20 years. Both in the global north and the global south. I was, as an undergraduate, a theology professor of mine at Notre Dame said that one of his colleagues was invited to a bring your parent to school day at his kid's grade school. And when they went around and said, "What do you do for a living?" Some people said, "Well, I'm a fireman and I'm a, insurance man," and so on. He said, "I sit in a room and I think about God." And that is exactly the kind of thing that this approach to theology is trying to get away from, in a sense. That theology is not just something you do in a room by yourself, maybe with a book in front of you, but it's something that's lived, and that a resource for theology is not simply documents, but is the lived experience of people. And so that is what Virginia is going to talk to us about tonight. So please join me in welcoming Virginia Azcuy.
Thank you very much for the presentation. First of all, I'm very grateful for the opportunity of being research scholar at the Center for World Catholicism here in DePaul University, especially to the rector Bill Cavanaugh. I'm going to deal with this subject, doing fieldwork in theology, and the reason I have chosen this issue for my research at the Center of World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology at DePaul can be expressed in these words of Elizabeth Phillips. Genuine attentiveness to people and genuine engagement with the complexities of their lives are only possible through research methods that take theologians beyond the desk and the library and into those lives. Doing theology through fieldwork could probably also be described as doing theology beyond the desk and therefore waking up to the world, to say it with Christian Sharen's words. In fact, however, it must be said that many theologians are talking about doing ethnography much more than doing ethnography. That's why I think it would be useful to consider this topic both in a theoretical and practical way, as the majority of recent theological ethnographic approaches do. Terms such as fieldwork, ethnography, and qualitative research need to be explained. But I would like also to exemplify how these approaches work using the concrete case study of a parish in Rosario, Santa Fe province, Argentina. Doing fieldwork in theology is one of the most powerful ways in this discipline to come down to earth, and I will try to show you why. In this presentation, I will deal with 3 points: doing fieldwork, ethnography, or the use of qualitative research in theology; 2, coming down to earth, doing ethnography in ecclesiology; and 3, a case study, Via Crucis, Stations of the Cross, at the parish Natividad del Señor. The first point: use and significance of the term fieldwork. First of all, I would like to explain the general use of the terms fieldwork, ethnography, and qualitative research in order to clarify basically how these methods can function for and also shape theology. In theology, fieldwork is a common way to refer to a form of research consisting in close contact with faith communities or congregations. This means that the researcher who does the fieldwork has the opportunity to collect data in a particular place or situation so that he's able to reach concrete beliefs, practices, and relationships. In other words, fieldwork enables theologians to do theology beyond the desk, which is actually a much needed way of thinking about faith with fruitful consequences for human life. In Christian Sharen's opinion, even though the theological ethnography approach has gained an audience among a network of scholars, both theologians and social scientists in the United States and other countries, there is a lack of textbooks on the methods used in fieldwork as part of the theological project. That's why he has proposed an approach called fieldwork in theology, which tries to understand the church as a concrete lived reality in and for the world. Sharen suggests that the social science of Pierre Bourdieu offers a way to do disciplined fieldwork in theology. First, Sharen uses Rowan Williams' phrase, the practice of disposition, related to Christian mission, more specifically, mission or sending according to the New Testament, in order to frame his understanding of the theology side of fieldwork in theology. Understanding mission as disposition led us to recognize, as Williams says, that fieldwork in theology is not as simple as the instructions for using a new phone or computer, because it implies being caught up in Jesus' own life in the Spirit, which opens up opportunities for communion we are not in control of. Secondly, he picks up Bourdieu's notion of field. We are shaped by a particular field or concrete social context, and what is shaped in us via the formative practice within a field is a habitus, or mode of being in the world. It is interesting to look at Sharen's explanations about the crucial pair field and habitus, because both terms demarcate sets of relationships. In Bourdieu's words, the body is in the social world, but the social world is in the body. I will come back to this reference to the body in the second part of my presentation. Ethnography and qualitative research. To introduce the term ethnography in theology, I would like to call attention to its relationship to qualitative research. As qualitative research is multi-method in focus, ethnography can be considered one of these methods. However, the term ethnography is often used by diverse disciplines as being synonymous with qualitative research. John Swinton and Harriet Moat's Practical Theology and Qualitative Research offer a good introduction to this issue. Qualitative research involves the utilization of a variety of methods and approaches which enable the researcher to explore the social world in an attempt to access and understand the unique ways that individuals and communities inhabit it. It assumes that human beings are by definition interpretative creatures, that the ways in which we make sense of the world and our experiences within it involve a constant process of interpretation and meaning-seeking. A simple way to conceptualize qualitative research is to use the analogy of a detective story, because it involves the painstaking and complex process of uncovering the details of who did what, when, and why within particular situations. Good qualitative research, like good detective work, is rigorous, painstaking, exacting, complex, and difficult. It requires a wide range of technical skills and a deep knowledge of interpretation. Qualitative research is used fairly widely in theology, especially in the areas of practical theology and religious studies or studies in spirituality, but also more recently in the areas of social ethics and ecclesiology. As Swinton and Mowat have suggested, qualitative research is a useful tool of complexification which enables practical theologians to gain deep and rich insights into the nature of situations and the forms of practice that are performed within them. But it is also clear that there are tensions with regard to epistemology and the ways the two disciplines define reality. In their opinion, Tillich's method of correlation, which brings situations into dialectical conversation with insights from the Christian tradition and perspectives drawn from other sources of knowledge, primarily the social sciences, shows its weakness in relation to the idea of mutual conversation. John Swinton points out the problem more clearly. Although in the method of mutual critical correlation the conversation appears to be mutual, in practice, theology easily collapses into the social sciences. Swinton's point is that mutual critical correlation is something that theologians seek, not ethnographers. And theologians who desire to use ethnography as part of their theologizing should approach the issue as theologians. After briefly mentioning how qualitative research has been received in the field of theology, I will deal with the issue of ethnography. Above all, it is useful to remember that as a multi-method approach, qualitative research can be developed through ethnography, which primarily uses fieldwork and reflexivity, or other methods such as life history, in which interviews are a prominent tool, or case studies, including fieldwork, observation, interviews, and documentary sources. The preference of one method or the combination of diverse methods will depend on the researcher and/or the situation to be explored. The roots of ethnography lie in the 19th century anthropology, but as the theologian Fieldwork points out, what is meant in contemporary research by the word ethnography is not always clear. He has referred to Martin Hammersley and Paul Atkinson's suggestion that the boundaries have been blurred between ethnography and terms such as qualitative research, fieldwork, interpretative method, and case study. In Ward's opinion, the shift to the use of the term ethnography has come about a range of different academic disciplines has started to make use of qualitative methodologies. In this context, the interest in ethnography in theology forms part of a more general term, which can be seen across many disciplinary fields toward practice and life. The series Studies in Ecclesiology and Ethnography shows that the term ethnography can be used as a comprehensive concept in relation to qualitative research. Following this definition, I will use the term ethnography inclusively, even though in the Latin American context, we prefer to distinguish the different traditions in qualitative research. Point 2, coming down to earth, doing ethnography in ecclesiology. In recent years, many theologians have tried to address ethnography in ecclesiology. At this point, I would like to explain why perspectives on and explorations of the intersection of ecclesiology and ethnography are useful and even necessary for the future of the Church and, in this sense, for the well-being of human life. Given our limited time for this presentation, I will offer a list of reasons why it is useful to talk about ecclesiological ethnography. And then we will deal with the case study. First, toward a plausible ecclesiology, given the frequent disconnect between what we say doctrinally about the Church and the experience of life in a local parish, we can easily recognize that the ethnographic voice has the potential to make a significant and urgently needed contribution to the contemporary discussion of the Church. The question is, how can theological study make any kind of credible contribution to the life of the Church? That is to say, in terms of plausibility in ecclesiology. In Ward's opinion, the credibility of ecclesiology rests not only on the rigor of its assertions, but also on its ability to shape and inspire people and the congregations, denominations, and organizations they form. What it does encourage is a way of talking about the Church that is closer, or at least more directly concerned with congregational life. 2. Approach to the concrete Church. Searching for plausibility in ecclesiology demands broader, more concrete forms of ecclesiological reflection. But in Haley's words, what is the concrete Church? It is not only the visible or empirical in contrast to its more spiritual or theological aspects, nor an institution which teaches doctrines and moral principles. The concrete Church is a distinctive way of life made possible by the action of the Holy Spirit and at the same time marked by the complexities and confusions of human activity. Ecclesiology should contribute to the health of the Church, which requires examining our human activity as it concretely is, rather than reflecting on the church in abstraction from its concrete identity. 3. The benefit of a theodramatic horizon. As Nicolaus Heli suggests, addressing Hans Urs von Balthasar's thought, the concrete church has frequently failed in its task of witness and pastoral care. The power of seeing is manifested not only in the actions of individuals, but in the Christian communal body, when the latter fosters practices, valuations, and beliefs in its membership that are incompatible with the gospel. Heli's attempt to pay attention to this side of the church must be understood in relation to the two remaining tendencies of modern ecclesiological method to reflect upon the church abstractly and in terms of perfection. In this sense, a theodramatic horizon can enable ecclesiology to help the church perform two main tasks within the contemporary ecclesiological context. 4. Creative reflection generated by a wound. Convenient with the reality of sin in the concrete church, it is appropriate to mention the presence of wounds that can also deeply mark the life of Christian communities. This is precisely what Mary McClinton Fulkerson is looking for as she evaluates the telos of practical theology's reading of a situation. She proposes that creative thinking originates at the site of a wound. A dilemma is perceived or felt that generates new rethinking, takes on the tradition, and develops new configurations and convergences of insight and reality. In this view, the task of theologians is to proceed from a place of woundedness to initiate theology from wounds that can be connected to deep social problems. Ecclesiological ethnography is able to explore and understand the community through a logic of transformation by tracing out the appearance of certain wounds and the ways in which they are in the process of being transformed. 5. Doing ecclesiology from the body. Different explorations in ecclesiology and ethnography search for the wisdom embodied in practice, often related to how people actually practice Eucharist within worshiping communities. Christian Scharen comments that his ethnographical approach to Eucharistic practice, freshly embodied in different contexts, has helped him get at a level of community that is not easily observable without the knowing that comes from the body through apprenticeship in situ. He has noticed that his embodied participation in the case studies went beyond typical participant observation. It was less observation and more throwing oneself into the life of the congregation as far as possible. Now, we're going to develop the case study at the parish Natividad del Señor, especially the Via Crucis stations of the cross. I will refer first the description of the case study and then an attempt of interpretation. As part of our research group in Buenos Aires, I was trying to develop a case study that would connect popular spirituality and hell. In my first search, I found the name of Ignacio Pérez Curupula Surilla, who was born in 1950 in Balangoda, Sri Lanka, formerly Ceylon. He belongs to the religious order Crusade of the Holy Spirit and is well known in our country and beyond for the healing of thousands and the continuous crowds around his parish Natividad del Señor in the city of Rosario. The fact that Ignacio Periez is alive was tremendously significant in my choice of this case, because I knew it would be possible for me to look at this empirical church, including the people's relationship with the priest. Through the initial interviews, it was clear to me that it would be difficult to develop the case study without focusing in some way on the figure of Ignacio Periez. In the interviews, I have perceived something controversial about him because of his dominant leadership. My first visit to the parish in July 2014 was very exciting. As my two colleagues and I entered the church, we saw Father Ignacio blessing people who were standing in line to approach him in front of the altar. That was all, but it has taken me more than 3 years to understand this scene. I went back with my colleagues for a second visit to the parish a couple of months later, in September, but we arrived too early in the afternoon and the church was closed. We saw a parking attendant and decided to approach him. Tomás was his name. He was eager to talk about Father Ignacio and the parish, and after a bit of conversation, I asked him why so many people, thousands, come continually to this church. His answer was that there were two kinds of medicine, one from below and the other from above, the medicine of heaven. And that was what was offered in this parish. His explanation seemed very simple, but as time went by, it turned out to be very telling of the close relationship between religious beliefs and the search for healing, especially among the working class and the poor. The following day, I went to Mass at the parish and observed that the liturgical style was traditional. People were quiet and perhaps also expectant. At the moment of the Eucharistic consecration, Father Ignacio said that this was the most important part of the Mass and invited us to pray to God. I will mention three main aspects in the description now. Father Ignacio Periez. Without a doubt, he has a singular charisma for the sick, and he recognizes it without attributing the healing to himself. Yes, God had given me a grace, but I can't explain what it is. It goes beyond my knowledge. I'm an instrument, and I've never healed anyone. It is God who heals. In journalist Jorge Cicolillo's opinion, it has been Ignacio's social commitment which has led him to the heart of the poor people. The context was the hyperinflation and hunger crisis in 1989 that led the civil unrest, protests, and lootings in supermarkets in Rosario and other parts of Argentina. Ignacio Periez brought a message of peace to the people, a hopeful voice that led to a rise in the priest's popularity. Ana Lucia Olmos Alvarez, an anthropologist, notes that the subjects of Ignacio's preaching were the social question and the binary of health illness, which can be understood as multidimensional reality, including physical, psychological, emotional, and social aspects. However, according to some of the interviewees, it is the attention to the sick that is the distinguishing characteristic of the parish and not its social projects. In fact, it doesn't seem that Ignacio Periez dismisses hegemonic medicine. After all, the parish has a health center as one of its services. But he introduces faith along with this as another way to health or to its deepest source, the practice of blessing. There are certainly different ways to explain the religious phenomenon that surrounds this priest and parish. The most remarkable events are the prayers for healing and the experience of being healed. According to the anthropologist Juan Maurice Renaud, it doesn't matter if the quality of healer associated with Ignacio Pérez corresponds to an objective reality. What the sick people believe about him is all that matters in order to build his prestige. Through in-depth interviews with persons and families with different religious beliefs and practices, I could recognize that Pérez's main practice in church and at other public occasions was that of blessing people, especially those who were sick and seeking personal contact. Due to the many thousands of patients who want to be blessed by Ignacio Pérez, the parish has organized an online service to schedule meetings with him on the weekends. Personal blessings are always given after Mass, which is celebrated by the priest, and it is not possible to enter the church after Mass has begun. These blessings can take many hours because of the large crowds that come together for this particular liturgy, but waiting doesn't seem to be a problem for people because the priest is there to receive, embrace, and bless each person. One by one, as Silvia Diaz describes the most powerful experience of all. The crowded Via Crucis. Originally in the 1970s, the blessings were given at home, and over time, Father Ignacio began to give blessings in the church after Mass. Due to the stories of healing closely related to his blessings, by the 1990s, there was a huge increase in people coming to receive blessings. In my opinion, this crescendo is easily recognized in the parish Via Crucis or Stations of the Cross procession. It began to gain visibility in 1993 with a crowd of 5,000 people. And today the crowd number around 250,000 or 300,000. The news of Father Ignacio's Via Crucis, as everyone calls it, appears each year in the local press and recounts some of the participants' healing stories, which reinforce the idea of the healing priest and the hope for the sick or suffering of being healed. I participated in the Via Crucis in 2015, and the immense crowd impressed me with its silent praying. There was something unusual for me in the case of this Via Crucis, namely Ignatius Pérez's blessing of the crowds. The practice of blessing usually takes place in the church, but here, in this different context of these throngs of people, there was something unique about it for me, especially in the mutual intercessory prayer among priest, people, and the sick at the end of the procession. Father Ignacio uses the Holy Cross to offer this prayer. The large cross, which was touched and embraced by the suffering people earlier in the church, and then carried by them through the streets during the Via Crucis. Using the same cross, he prays for all and offers the blessing of Jesus Christ. He prays for the people and the people pray for him. Both prayers were made in mystical union with the cross of Christ. Essay of theological discernment or interpretation. I use the term discernment now to explain that doing fieldwork in theology requires not only participant observation and interviews, but also the ability to see theologically at a deeper level. First, devotion to the cross of Christ in the Church. The Via Crucis of the parish Natividad del Señor begins with the celebration of the liturgy of the Stations of the Cross in the Church, as is traditional on Good Friday in the Catholic Church. The principal elements of this liturgy are the proclamation of the Word, adoration of the Cross, and Eucharist, or Communion. But another element present here is the sufferings, spiritual experiences that have taken place in the Church during blessings throughout the years. These experiences seem to saturate the shrine with powerful emotions. For those who have been or are sick, the cross of Christ offers relief from their pain and perhaps also a sense of Christian meaning for their suffering. To illustrate what I'm saying, I would like to refer to Mary McClinton Fulkerson's idea of wound as a departure point in ethnographic research. The symbol of the cross recalls the wound of the sick as much as the source of salvation. Christ's cross can also be seen as a salvific wound, which is also common in the Christian tradition. For the sick, what really matters is not whether they can recover their physical health, but rather the fact that they are looking for healing and want to be healed by God, or perhaps simply be healed in some way. 2. The Good Friday procession in the neighborhood. The religious procession with the Holy Cross symbolically embodies the Church in via. Similar to a pilgrimage, the procession stages the human condition and its fragility. The Via Crucis of Natividad del Señor is organized by lay people as a journey through the streets of the neighborhood in order to offer the possibility to participate along the way. It is the Church as God's people who walks between suffering and hope, disease and health. During the stations of the Via Crucis, the Gospel is proclaimed and the crowd offers its prayers, especially for the neighborhood and the suffering. The leaders of the procession, one of them Ignacio Pérez, guide the meditation, call attention to Jesus Christ's mercy, and invite the people to pray to God to receive His friendship and compassion. 3. Blessing of the crowds. The pastoral activities at the parish Natividad del Señor in Rosario, such as its Good Friday liturgy, can be distinguished by the presence of Ignacio Pérez, who has been known as a healer priest in Ruchi, a suburb of Rosario, for more than 35 years. He's not the only person in a ministry role. Considering that constantly hosting so many thousands of people requires a good team to attend to the logistics and to guide people during the different liturgies. It is the presence of the people in need of healing which makes him the most important figure. As in other shrines devoted to the Virgin Mary or saints, the priest here seems to play a sacramental role. What people often realize looking at him is that service can shape Christian life. Ignacio Pérez's blessing of the crowd at the end of the Via Crucis procession is similar and allows those gathered together to see the gospel of mercy playing out among the worried, tired, and sick. However, being present at the time of the blessing shows that not only the priest has the power of intercession, but the crowds of faithful as well. The priest prays for the crowds, leads them in prayer, and finally asks them for their prayer for himself. These prayers conclude the walking pilgrimage, gathering procession and benediction, and people take holy water, medals, or rosaries as signs of the privileged time experienced at the Natividad del Señor. And for a question, a charismatic movement or the emergence of popular spirituality? The anthropologist Ana Olmos Alvarez suggests reading the case as a charismatic movement of healing, but I'm not actually convinced of this understanding, even though I recognize a singular charisma in Father Ignatius' leadership. I think that the popular expression of faith plays a very dominant role in the gatherings at the parish, Natividad del Señor. Some principal elements to be considered are the significance attributed to the shrine and its leader, the practices of pilgrimage or procession, the blessings and the healing power of the crowd. In this case study, the wounds, according to Fulkerson, are especially incarnated in the people who are sick and desperate. And transformation comes through a personal or family spiritual experience in the context of the crowd. The defining characteristic of the parish Natividad del Señor is perhaps its ability to facilitate the acknowledgement of wounds and the need of health or healing, and to open the way for the emergence of popular spirituality. The spirituality lived out at this parish is naturally a Catholic one, but it can probably be characterized as popular Christian spirituality, or simply as popular spirituality, given the different religious traditions and beliefs of the people. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Virginia. We have time for questions and discussion. If you'd like to ask a question, we'd ask that you please come to the microphone here for recording.
Thank you, Virginia, for a wonderful presentation. I have two questions, actually three, but I'll ask two. The first is a very challenging question for me too, because I like to do ethnography too, the kind of method you described. But I do confront one challenge. That first is the New Testament evidence. In three places I like to refer to. First is the writer of Luke Acts that said, after considering all things that have taken place, I have decided to give an ordered account to you, O Theophilus. So at the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, the writer is saying, I have looked at all things. And then in the Gospel of, in first letter of St. John, writer St. John said, what I have seen, what I have touched, what we have heard, what we have experienced. And then again, the St. Peter talks again, be prepared to give an account of the hope that is in you. So my concern is that the person who is doing ethnography goes into the field. To what extent, in your own thinking, is the account of the ethnographer who comes and experiences and goes to give an account, to what extent is that account similar to what we find, especially in the New Testament, and what I think is still valid, that the person is talking about a community in which that person lives. That is, the theologian is a visitor who is observing, like on a field trip, and then goes back to give an account. Is it still not what you're trying to propose avoiding, that is still doing theology, is still a bit elitist? And secondly, that's the next question to this. If someone is visiting to collect the data and then write an account, how do you avoid prejudgment? You know, the hidden transcript in your own worldview from being imposed on the data that you are encountering. So those are two questions I would like to get, from your own experience, especially the account you have given. How valid is the account, like this one that you have given, in terms of that this represents truly the faith of the people and not the judgment of the theologian?
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. Yes, the risk for theologians is to do theology on the desk, and ethnography is searched, or is a tool that can lead us to the possibility of doing theology beyond the desk. That is, in relation to people suffering, or in relation to different ordinary situations. And here is experience, human experience, or social places, contexts, very important in order to develop a concrete theology, or a theology that has the ability to reach the interests and the difficulties of people. And naturally, this source, the experience as source, will be considered, or should be considered, in relation with sacred scriptures and tradition and other perspectives of the academic realm. But it is important to valorize, to appreciate what experience, human experience, can give us to think. And in this perspective is to be understand ethnography and fieldwork in theology. It is not easy, because for some academic realms this work as ethnography, fieldwork, or qualitative research is not seen as scientific. But it has the privilege of connecting with the simple experiences of each day. So I think it can actually give new perspectives to the theological work. And the second question is also very interesting, and points out a risk in doing theology, or in doing fieldwork in theology, and that is to put our own representations and our own interests in the situation and to connect our own perspectives with a case study. The risk is there, but for ethnographers and for theologians who are looking for doing ethnographical work, it is very important to do reflexivity. That is, to have the ability to reflect about their own concepts, their own perspectives, their own presuppositions, and to be critical with their own perspectives, and to be open to the news or new things that can appear in the or through the process of the ethnography. It is also important to have the humility for recognizing that this ethnographic work is often to new perspectives or to change through the process of the research. That is, that the ethnographer is coming slowly to the case study and to the understanding of the case study over the situation.
Thanks, Virginia. We were talking about healing yesterday in class, so a number of my students are here, and we saw a YouTube clip of a healer in, a kind of Pentecostal healer in Ghana, I think it was, and they brought a man up on stage, and they brought him up on a stretcher, and the announcer said that this man hasn't walked in a long time, and he's got heart disease, and he can't walk, and so on. So they brought him up on stage, and the healer kind of raised him, and then he started walking around, and everybody jumped up and down and said it's a miracle, and so on. The reaction of my students was skeptical, right? And the reaction was, yeah, you can get anybody to lie down on a stretcher, bring him up on stage, say he can't walk, and then he gets up and he starts walking. What advice would you give us for interpreting that scene? It's hard to know how exactly to react to that scene. What advice would you give us for reading it in a way that neither on the one hand, neither on the one hand just dismisses it, or on the other hand, I don't know. I mean, are we supposed to just kind of take it for? I mean, it's interesting. For example, what you said before in this talk, that at least in the opinion of one of your commentators, it didn't matter if people were actually getting healed or not. What really matters is that people think people are being healed. Or the conclusion that you have here is that the defining characteristic is perhaps its ability to facilitate the acknowledgments of wounds and the need for health and healing. But a lot of people are going to want to know, it seems like, maybe a lot of people who come, who are sick, they're going to want to know, is it really happening or not? Right? So how do you deal with that question? Are people really being healed here physically or not? What advice can you give us for kind of dealing with that basic sort of question?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, it is a difficult point. there are different perspectives to see this problem. I think first it is important to recognize that all of us in some way are in need of healing. We need forgiveness, we need hope, we need new relationships, we need faith, and we need health. Why not? Why not? We have the experience, or we know that other persons have the experience of illness, and I ask me why are they not able to go to a church, to a parish, to ask for healing? Why not? I think it is a good reaction for people, and I think it is difficult for me personally to judge about it and to say they are looking for the healer and they have no faith, and perhaps they have faith, and that's why they are there, or they go there to ask for healing. Naturally, it is difficult to manage or to control what people feel and what people think, and why they go, or they think it is not important to go there, or some other places. But for me it is very telling to see that many people who comes to this parish, for instance, are people that belong to other parishes, or that belong to other congregations, or they are people that have no contact with the Catholic Church or with churches in general. And I think it is respectable. We cannot know if whether they will be healed or not. I think that is not the important aspect. But the reality or the experience that people can recognize that they are in need, they have heard the stories of others, and they think that they would have a spiritual experience there. They are looking for something. Many times they are looking for God. Other times they are looking for something that they don't know what it is. And other times they are looking for health, not only physical health, but also emotional health or psychological health, or they are looking for something unusual that is typical of shrines or churches which gather crowds, that people have a particular feeling in relation to these places, and think that it would be a good experience to go there. And why not? Why not? Sometimes I I think that we are in the universities, in the academic realm, very critical with this, the different experiences of faith and the different religious experiences. Why not? Why not?
Thank you, Virginia. I'm a theologian at the desk. I'm Ella Hagan from Loyola University, okay? I do not do field work, and I have only what you gave me. I don't know anything about this. What I know, however, from my work in medical ethics is that we could start to explain phenomena. We know that healing takes place with placebos, for example, and mass gatherings can actually produce hormones and so on that activate self-healing processes, let's say. A psychologist might look at it differently. All fine, and I agree with you. Why should these people not go there? But the question about the method still remains, I think. You know, Gadamer and the question of hermeneutics that came up in the beginning, let's say, of the 20th century as a response to Dilthey's hermeneutics of immersion, Einfühlung, feeling with the other. Get as close as possible to the person you want to understand or the phenomenon you want to understand, and that kind of guarantees that you get it right. And it was already Gadamer who said, no, it's not about immersion, it is about interaction, it is dialogue. Yeah, you have to, of course, pay attention, attend to the experiences, to what you see, what you perceive. As you said, it is painful, it's like the detective gathering everything and so on, but I took always from Gadamer, be aware of your own position. Okay, you are asking a question to a text, trying to understand what question the text answers, and it is a kind of an interaction. Don't hide yourself. It's a dialogue, and I sometimes wonder in ethnographic studies whether the researcher does not hide a little bit too much, so that exactly this dialogue cannot take place. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that when maybe that this is for sociologists, so I'm fine with them, but if you say the theologian should come as a theologian to the ethnographic fieldwork, I think you have every right to be present as a theologian. So I would like to hear more about that. And my last comment, I do a lot of hermeneutical work with literature. I run into the same problem as you will run, or everyone who does ethnography does. It's not representative. I don't care in my work with literature whether it is representative, because I'm not even looking for any representative experiences. So there's a lot of similarity, of course, yeah. But I call my work a critical hermeneutics. So my question to you is, in this situation, what if you, as a researcher, discovered that this person is abusing his power? I'm not saying that he does, but what if? What would that change your position as the interpreter? Or would you still say, no, my work is descriptive. I only want to understand. I want to get as close as possible in order to discern. So what is there a place for critique of practices in the method.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I agree with you that the risk in ethnography is to do only description and to do only the first step of immersion and connecting with the reality and with the experiences of people. And what I have learned and refreshed here in these 2 months is just that for theologians it is a big responsibility to do the second step, which is joined with the first one, in order to do the theological lecture or reading of the situation or of the case study. I think for me it was a very good exercise to see the crowds, the faith crowds as phenomena through different in-depth interviews and participant observation, and to reflect about its connection, its relationship with the priest, and also I didn't have the time to explain more, but to reflect on the ecclesiology in this case, because the leadership of the priest is in some way built from the people, but it is not a shared leadership. That is the lay who participate in the parish and to collaborate with this parish pastoral are always in a second place, and it is difficult to approach them because they are gathered around the priest. And but I think it is ecclesiology. It is also difficult, the relationship of the parish or the shrine with the diocese. In terms of relationship to bishops, it has been very difficult, and in relation with other priests, it is always controversial. It has always something that doesn't function at all. But I wanted to see how this popular spirituality is lived in the parish, and it is actually true that the procession, the pilgrimage, the healing water, the prayer there, these aspects are really very important for people and for different people. Whether they come from another parish or they have no connection with church. So for me, as theologian, it is very important the case study to think about popular spirituality. Is there any popular spirituality in the borderlands, or if you think that in poor realms in Argentina, the 90% have faith, 90% people have faith, and 60% have faith in a healer mediation, or in a healer. That is that the relationship between health and faith is very close. And I think it is important to us at the university and as theologians not only to speak about the spirituality in our communities, because there are other forms of spirituality. They are probably with defect, that is, they are not perfect, but they have some ways of manifestation, and it is, I think it is important for the church to know about it. Another question of you was if a case study is representative or not. It's naturally a particular study, and that is, it is not useful for universal conclusions. But for similar cases, it would offer some perspectives or themes.
Pues mil gracias. Thank you very much. Fascinating presentation. I just have a quick comment about this last slide and then a question about the hermeneutical problem. So the last slide is very interesting to me because in the juxtaposition there of the two different interpretations, charismatic movement or popular spirituality, I find this is a question that comes up a lot in terms of Latino religiosity in the United States. There's a quick move on the part of certain social scientists to use the term charismatic. But as you indicate in the slide, you say, I'm not actually convinced as understanding, even though the Father Ignacio has charismatic leadership. There's a slippage of language there that has to be attended to about whether using charismatic in the Weberian sense or whether using charismatic in the Pauline sense, not to speak about charismatic renewal and what understandings that has with it. So the hermeneutical problem comes in here already when we're trying to just use a simple word that has multiple dimensions of meaning depending on how you approach it. Then with respect to the hermeneutical problem, I can speak a little bit from my own experience in trying to do the exact type of study that you're proposing here. You, I think, accurately defended the need for reflexivity. And so you have a narrative that you develop as a participant observer, and then you have a process of theological discernment. And the reflexivity allows you, precisely in the sense meant by the Gadameryan conversation with the text of popular religion, to question your own presuppositions in then developing both the narrative and the theological discernment. But this is the question for me in my own work that I'd like you to address, perhaps, is a participant and observer is a participant and an observer. And in both levels, the narration of what happened and then the process of discernment, I'm always, there's a certain tension about whether I'm participating or whether I am observing, or how I weave the first person singular together with the third person singular. I don't know if you've felt that or reflected on that in your own work.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, the last question is what I'm thinking about at the moment, but I cannot explain it now, but it points out two different perspectives, and I think the case can be problematized with the two perspectives. because the charismatic element is clearly manifest in the personality of the priests, and on the other side, the charismatic element is not so much visible in the crowd, or in a different way. And the crowd is for me a very, very important question. How can we deal with the crowds? Sometimes I have the impression that we give up this topic. The crowd is the crowd and point. And I think that it is not so easy, and it is very important to think about it. I have not the answers, but I'm searching in this perspective. And yeah, reflexivity is the goal, is one of the most important things and tools in ethnographical work. And at the same time, the ethnographic work means that I or you as researcher have our own voice, have our own perspectives, have our own presuppositions. The important point is to reflect about it, but not to put them aside, because that is the case study that I have reflected. You can reflect about the same case in a different way, and that will be your reading, your proposal, and it is all right. And I think that shows that each person, each of us, have presuppositions, have perspectives, have interests, and they always come at the moment of the reflection. And the important point is to know about them and to reflect about them. And naturally, I'm reflecting about popular spirituality, so that my questions and my focus is there. I'm not reflecting about Father Ignacio, as I have said, even though when he's a principal figure of his history, this history.
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone would like to ask a question?
Hello, Virginia. Thank you for your study. I grew up in Rosario, and I actually do not have a question. I just thought that I would like to share something with you guys. Regarding what you said about the placebo effect, well, probably, right? I mean, when you have faith, but I will be brief because of time, but many years ago, I attended to the parish. My one best friend, she had an accident. She had like 70% chances of dying. I haven't heard about Padre Ignacio. And so my friends said, let's go to the parish, pray for our friend. So I attended. And what I saw is that Father Ignacio touched, like when he gives the blessings, he touches the people where they are sick without people telling them. Let's say you have cancer, you know, in your tummy, he would touch you there without, you know, without telling him anything. So, of course, you don't know me and you can believe me or not. I just wanted to share that kind of things. And he also will tell you, if he, not to everybody, but to many people, like a brief sentence. And I know many people, friends, acquaintances, family, who attended, and he really told them specific things. To me, he did that. And so I just wanted to show. And another thing, like sometimes I have a cousin who was having problems having babies, and so he uses also like kind of little Jesus made of wood, and also he would put it in your tummy, like, you know, without talking. And so that's the only thing I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your experience, and I didn't know you were here. But I think it is very important to share the experiences, and that is a way for many people to know these or other places where they can go to pray, to ask for healing or for help. Yes, thank you very much.
May I just respond one sentence, because of the placebo. You know, honestly, don't misunderstand what I wanted to say. Doctors are almost surprised about this placebo effect, and they cannot explain it. So my point is actually to say, well, we come from a very modern medicine perspective where we can explain causes, effects, and so on, but that is only one dimension of, we call it maybe disease, yeah, the functional dysfunction or something. But there's also the subjective illness, of course, that is linked normally to some kind of pain or suffering or so, but it is very complex, this relationship, and the interrelation then between believing in one's own healing, either by taking a pill or by whatever. We do not have an explanation for that. And then there's also the social side of let's say, sickness. Yeah. So when I speak as an ethicist about healing, I need to know what do you respond to? Is that the disease? Then ask a physician. Are you talking about the suffering? Sometimes the pain, the isolation. And that is why it is so important that you said sometimes people are healed in a different way than they thought the origin of their pain was. You know, and what you say is so strong, and it is not so unusual. There are people who have this healing power to target or whatever, and as you said, this priest cannot even explain it himself. But I didn't mean, that's why I wanted to respond to that, I did not mean to kind of denigrate that at all. It's the way we speak about illness and disease and sickness that matters here. So it's not only charismatic, this word, it's also the term illness, disease, or whatever we use, and the term healing that we have to reflect upon, right?
Thanks. This has been a really rich presentation. Before I ask you all to join me in thanking Virginia, I just want to make a couple of short announcements. One is to embarrass Anna Kreutz, who is our student worker who's been tremendously instrumental in pulling off all of these events that we've had over the last couple of years. This is her last event, so if you please join me in thanking her. And of course, Karen Kraft and Francis Salinel, who are really run this. And Karen, what's the next event? Do you want to?
Yeah, our next, Our next event is coming up on March the 8th, so 2 weeks from yesterday, and it's a lunch seminar, Democracy, Culture, and Catholicism, and it's kind of a case study in a way. It's a collection of essays that have become a book, collection of essays from Indonesia, Lithuania, Peru, and the US, and the two editors of the book from Loyola will be with us for the presentation. So we're going to come back for that. Thanks again for being here tonight.
Finally, then, let's thank Virginia for her presentation tonight.
Thank you very much.